Chapter 141. What's more, who in Zlokova doesn't know that my mother is the distinguished daughter of the nobility of Staslo? Louis had no feelings for this woman and did not want to pay any attention to her. Willow stopped him. I'm sorry, I was too impulsive just now. I still have to thank you. You're the one who caught me in time. You let go of Louis's gaze landed on the bracelet on Willow's right hand, and his expression changed to one of shock. He grabbed her hand abruptly and asked, where did this bracelet come from? Willow was flustered. Why would he ask me about this bracelet? Answer me. This is, Willow felt that he cared a lot about this bracelet. Could it be that the bracelet left by that whore's mother has any connection with him? If that's the case, then She bit her lip and answered, it's a gift from my mother. Louis stared at her closely and asked word by word, is your mother Marina? Willow felt a little guilty. How could Marina be my mother, but what's the relationship between Marina and the Lucas family? She asked cautiously. Do you have anything to say about that? Hee. Louis smiled mockingly. The daughter of my aunt is actually someone like you? Aunt, Marina is Louis's aunt, in other words, that bitch is his cousin, Marina is his aunt. So Marina is his mother's sister, according to seniority. His mother is Larissa de Arma, the eldest daughter of the de Arma, so, that means Maisie's mother was also one of the members of the de Arma. Her face turned pallid instantly. How so? That bitch's mother turns out to be a noblewoman. What's your name? My name is Willow. Give me your number, and I'll contact you in the future. Louis saved her cell phone number and left without looking back. If he had not seen the bracelet that looked exactly like the one that his mother wore on her wrist, he would never have believed that this woman would turn out to be his aunt's daughter, the one his mother had been looking for all this while. 2. This annoying woman turns out to be my cousin. Willow returned to the Vanderbilt manor in a petrified and bewildered mental state. Layla suddenly became worried when she saw her daughter's expression. Willie, what's the matter with you? Why do you look so distressed? Mom. That bitch's mother is a member of a noble family known as the de Arma. Layla looked shocked. What are you talking about? Willow grabbed her mother's hand agitatedly and recounted what happened earlier today. Layla was even more shocked than her. She even picked up the bracelet that Willow was wearing and took a glance at it. Mr. Lucas actually thought Willow was Marina's daughter just because of Marina's bracelet. Damn, that bitch turns out to be a noble woman. She's a member of the nobility of Staslo, which is also related to the royal family. That's something that the Vanderbilts can never compete with in this lifetime. The Lucas family was originally only a famous family of violinists. It was the marriage between the son of the Lucas family and the daughter of the de Armas that catapulted them into the upper-class circle of Zlokova and gave them the extraordinary status that they had today. Marina turns out to be the descendant of the de Armas, which means that that bitch is also a noblewoman. Mom, what should we do now? You can't let your dad know about this, and neither can Grandma know about it. Layla grabbed Willow by the shoulder. Nor should you let that bitch know. Mom. Could it be? Willow stared at her mother with a hint of astonishment. A ruthless beam was flashing from the bottom of Layla's eyes. Since Mr. Lucas thought that you're Marina's daughter, we should just play along with the flow and snatch Maisie's identity from her. Snatch Maisie's identity from her. Willow could not help but feel nervous. She did not expect her mother's thoughts to be the same as the idea that had flashed across her mind for a split second. Chapter 142. This bracelet belongs to Maisie's mother, but how could I know that Maisie's mother was a noblewoman? If I were to return the bracelet to Maisie, wouldn't I be creating an opportunity for them to recognize her? How could I allow Maisie to regain this identity of hers so that she could step on us for the rest of our lives? But, as for Dad's, Willow still had concerns. Layla thought about it calmly for a moment. Your dad probably doesn't know about this. So don't let him or your grandma know about it. Willie, take the bracelet and go to meet Madame Lucas, then find a way to hide your past until you get the chance to approach the D'Arma. You'll definitely get everything that you desire when you take that bitch's place in the family. Layla had gotten used to difficult times since she was a child. If she had not met Steven, she would still be living frugally in a small hut somewhere around the city. She naturally did not want Willow to be like her. Although she knew that the Vanderbilt's wealth would not make Willow and her filthy rich, they were at least living a safe and stable life. If Willow were to climb up the social ladder successfully in the future, it was only natural that she would be able to enjoy the benefits that came with it as her mother. As for Steven and Mother, there's no way that I can't fool them, and how many more years can Mother live when she kicks the bucket? Wouldn't all of Steven's properties go to my son if I were to give birth to a son? When Willow becomes the daughter of nobility, she'll then assist her younger brother. That's when my life will be considered truly fulfilled. Willow gnashed her teeth. Indeed, I'm inferior to Maisie. I've always been shunned because of my identity as an illegitimate daughter. If it weren't for that bitch's return to Zlokova with her 3 bastard kids, I'd definitely become Mrs. Goldman within a few years. Since Maisie has snatched my man away from me, then don't blame me for snatching her identity. At the same time, Louis went back to the academy and went to see the boy, and as expected, he saw the boy through the door of the classroom. He was sitting in front of the piano and was playing music for the music students in his class. Louis leaned against the door and witnessed the whole process. The kid he had seen in the Michelin restaurant looked almost the same as the boy in front of him. But after taking a closer look, they indeed did not look similar. It's their temperament. The rascal that I met at the restaurant had very indifferent eyes. He also looked ruthless and extremely hostile. As for the boy sitting in front of the piano, this rascal looks very smart and shrewd. Mr. Lucas, why are you here? The music teacher walked toward him. When the students, who were singing very seriously, saw him, they somehow went off pitch, causing Colton to stop his performance. Louis took a glance at the little boy and explained to the music teacher, "It's nothing. I just came over to take a look. You may continue." Colton was summoned to Louis's office after class. Colton extended his little head into Louis's office, and when he saw that he was drinking water, he asked with a chuckle, "Mr. Lucas, are you looking for me?" Louis put down his thermos. "Why are you hiding outside? Come in." Colton walked up to him. "Why are you looking for me?" Louis pulled a chair out, sat down in front of him, and scrutinized him for a moment. "Do you have any twin brothers?" Colton blinked. "I have an elder brother and younger sister." Louis understood a thing or two upon hearing his answer. Seeing that he did not continue to speak, Colton asked curiously, "Professor Lucas, why are you asking me this?" "Why am I asking this?" Louis did not know. It was probably because he thought it was strange that 2 kids looked indeed too similar to have such distinctive personalities. "It's nothing, you can go back." Chapter 143. Colton responded, "Oh, okay." He then scampered out of the room again. Louis picked up the information on his desk and took a glance at it. "Colton. This boy's last name is Vanderbilt too?" Nolan had heard that Steven had come to see Maisie. Nobody knew what he had told her, but it was obvious that Maisie had been a little depressed and had been staying in her office since then. Did Steven come to make things difficult for her again? He went directly to the 16th floor upon thinking of this. Nolan walked up to her office door and opened it, only to see her curled up on the couch. Her expression looked a little depressed. She did not even give off her usual reaction when she saw Nolan. The woman who would swing her claws like a tiny wild cat whenever she met him was sitting quietly as if she was a poor cat that had been abandoned, making Nolan feel a little at a loss. He walked up to her, looked down at her, and stretched out his hand to rub the top of her head after a long time. Her eyes moved, and after raising her eyes to look at Nolan, she turned her face slightly away and whispered, "Don't give me that look. I don't need your comfort." His gaze felt like he was looking at a pitiful person. Nolan turned around and sat down beside her. Did you get scolded again? No. Then why did he come looking for you? Maisie did not answer his question. Seeing that Maisie did not answer, Nolan wrapped his arms around her shoulders and let her lie on his thighs. Maisie was startled. What are you doing? Sleep, everything will be fine after a nap. His voice was low and melodious, as if it contained magical effects. He placed his hand on her shoulder and made no other movements. He was simply lending his thighs to her as a pillow for her to sleep on. Maisie's stiff body gradually relaxed, and her eyelids drooped slightly. After a moment of silence, Maisie opened her mouth and asked, Nolan, did you choose to be with me because of the kids? Nolan looked down at her. Why would you ask so? Maisie responded, if we're staying together only because of the kids, won't it be particularly unfair to them, a marriage that's built solely on top of the kids and without any feelings for each other? They'll think the same, won't they? I did so not completely because of that reason, Nolan answered lightly. Nolan was staring at Maisie when she turned her head to look at him. Do you only have so little confidence in yourself? She was stupefied for a split second. Do I not have confidence in myself? Or do I not have confidence in marriage? Or is it that you don't trust me? He asked in reply indifferently, and she was stunned for an instant. Probably because of the bewilderment left behind by what her father had said to her earlier today. Maisie did not know what she should believe at this moment. Nolan looked at the woman who was lying on his thighs and smiled disappointedly. It seems that it'll still take some time before I get myself an official wife. Maisie quickly sat up and asked, how can you be so shameless? He smiled and took her into his arms. Because I want you more than prestige. Maisie's cheeks blushed, and she pushed him away furiously. Go fuck yourself, don't you dare have any perverted thoughts, and let me go. Seeing that she had recovered and returned to being her usual self, Nolan only smiled and said nothing. What perverted thoughts can I have? All I want is to marry her legally. Isn't that a beautiful plan? Maisie would have slapped him with her shoes if she were to know what he was thinking, but fortunately, there was a knock on the door. Maisie escaped from his arms, glared at him, and went to open the door. Quincy stood outside the door and was looking around the office. Is Mr. Goldman here? Nolan got up, walked up to her back, and glared coldly at the person at the door. Chapter 144. This bastard only knows how to ruin the atmosphere. Quincy did not care if Nolan was about to kill him and reported, Mr. Goldman Sr. has called you via a video call, saying there's something important. Nolan returned to his office. Mr. Goldman Sr., who was on the screen, seemed to have been waiting for him since long ago. Seeing that Nolan had sat down at his desk, Mr. Goldman Sr. asked, Z's mother is from the De Arma? Nolan's gaze looked indifferent. Did Hans tell you that? I've only asked Hans to investigate this matter and didn't even tell Quincy about it. Mr. Goldman Sr.'s expression dimmed. Your grandfather will return to Zlokova in mid-June. Grandfather is coming back? Humph. Isn't it obvious that he's coming back because he learned that you have kids now? What makes you think he can resist the urge to come back to take a look at those kids? Above all, what makes you think you can hide the news from him? Nolan did not say anything. He only knew that because his great-grandfather had some history with the royal family of Staslo, he had been in some disputes with the De Arma. Nolan's father was rather okay with it. But his grandfather was greatly influenced by his great-grandfather and did not have a positive impression of the De Arma. That was why Nolan did not plan to tell his father about it after investigating the identity and background of Maisie's mother. Mr. Goldman Sr. seemed to know what he was thinking and said, about her relationship with the De Arma, I'll keep it from your grandfather for you for now, we'll only talk about it when he returns to Zlokova next month. Although this son of mine is quite a jerk, he's still my only son. He's in his 30s, and he finally got himself kids and a wife. Wouldn't he be a bachelor for the rest of his life if his wife were to run away from this relationship? Nolan lowered his eyes and smiled. Understood. Quincy, who was standing by the side, asked nervously, Mr. Goldman. Is the elder master really going to return to Zelkova in June? Probably. He rubbed his forehead. Compared to his father, his grandfather, Titus Goldman, was the most difficult person to please and the entire family. Because of the influence of Nolan's great-grandfather, Titus did not have a good impression of the royal family and nobility of Stosslo, not to mention that his temper was even more outrageous than his father's. I can only leave it up to the three rugrats living back in the mansion to tune the old, rough, and bad-tempered man when the time comes. That night, Willow dressed up to meet with Louis in one of the private rooms of the tipsy-turvy bistro in the Siberian Palace Hotel. As soon as she walked into the private room, she saw a few bodyguards standing beside Louis in the private room. Sitting on the main seat was a dignified and graceful middle-aged woman sipping a cup of coffee in a one-piece evening dress. Her long curly hair was resting on her shoulders, and her extremely well-maintained and picturesque face made her look like she was in her 20s. Willow was surprised deep down. She's definitely worthy of being called a noblewoman. Her demeanor and grace are truly unmatched. Larissa took a sip of the coffee, wiped her lipstick off the edge of the mug, and raised her beautiful eyes slightly. Let me take a look at your bracelet. Willow returned to her senses, stepped forward, removed the bracelet, and handed it to her. Larissa took the bracelet from her hand. The golden pattern on it was indeed a match with the bracelet on her hand. These bracelets had originally been given to the sisters. One was in Larissa's possession, while the other was with her sister. Where has your mother been all these years? Larissa looked up at her directly. Willow bit her lip. She has passed away. She quickly added upon thinking of something. In addition to this, she also left a jewelry company behind. A jewelry company? Yes, it's named Vena Jewelry. Willow pretended to be sad. Unfortunately, I'm not competent enough to lead the company toward a brighter future. Larissa frowned slightly. Although she did not leave her house much, she still paid attention to the news from the outside world. Chapter 145. Vena Jewelry was frequently in the limelight some time ago, not to mention that this young lady named Willow Vanderbilt was deeply involved in the scandal that framed Miss Santiago. If it wasn't because she had Marina's bracelet, the incident with Miss Santiago. Is it really your doing? That isn't my doing. Willow pretended to be aggrieved. I got framed. I don't even know Ms. Santiago, and I don't know why she would frame me. Larissa put the coffee cup down. How come you and your mother, Marina, are so different in character? The sentence almost choked Willow as her heart skipped a beat. Is she suspecting something? Willow's forehead was perspiring imperceptibly, and her expression looked embarrassed. My mother passed away when I was very young. A nanny brought me up. Is it? Larissa scrutinized the young lady in front of her. She's very obsequious and extra careful. She's indeed very different from Marina. Marina ran away from home decades ago, and there was not even a word about her. If it weren't for this bracelet, I wouldn't even dare to conclude that. Since you're Marina's daughter, you should call me aunt from now on. Louis is your cousin. Just call him whenever you need help. Willow tried her best to conceal the pride at the bottom of her eyes and behaved very implicitly. Understood. Aunt. All she could think about before she came here was her mother's advice, saying that Maisie must not obtain Vena Jewelry. But judging from Vena's current situation, it will really not belong to the Vanderbilts anymore if the bitch asks Nolan to purchase the company as a whole. Although I'm not interested in owning Vena Jewelry, as long as it's something that the bitch wants to get her hands on, I'll definitely put up a fight and make her life a living hell. The next day, Kennedy had a distressed expression as he sat in the department's conference room with Maisie. On the screen was Vena Jewelry, which the Santiago had been suppressing the past few days. Its stock value had actually risen by 60% overnight. Where did Vena get so much capital to cover the loss? Maisie looked at Kennedy. Kennedy shook his head. I don't know that either. This not only covered the losses that Venna was facing, but also provided them with so much circulating capital. Can Stephen come up with so much money in such a short time? No, Maisie propped her chin and was deep in thought. There's no way that my father can raise to come up with $15 million. I know best whether the Vanderbilts have the capital to do so. Not only does Stephen not have the ability to come up with $15 million, but the whole Vanderbilt's family doesn't even have that much property. Could it be Willow or Layla? But where did they get so much money? Kennedy arrived at a light-bulb moment and asked. Could it be that someone is helping them from behind the curtains? Maisie could not explain all the details clearly. That's the only reasonable explanation, but... She stood up slowly, propping her upper body on the table, and her red lips slightly rose. Things are getting more and more interesting. Seeing that she actually laughed, Kennedy could not help but be a little worried. She turned her head and said to Kennedy, it's time to contact Freddie again. I want to see who's helping the mother and daughter pair from the shadows. At present, Madame Vanderbilt and Layla were the happiest and proudest family members amongst all the Vanderbilts who had learned about the news, especially Madame Vanderbilt, who looked at Willow with admiration. Willie, it turns out that you still know such a wealthy friend, $15 million. Oh, was it Mr. Goldman who gave it to you? Madame Vanderbilt's attitude toward Willow had completely changed after learning that Willow was close to Mr. Goldman. Now that Willow could come up with $15 million to clean up the mess that Venna was in, it was only natural that Madame Vanderbilt was getting more and more satisfied with her. Willow did not answer the question clearly. After all, I can't say that the money actually came from the Lucas family. Wouldn't I be exposed if this old lady were to pay the Lucas family a visit someday in the future? Chapter 146. Grandma, you can relax, now that Venna is getting back on track. How could I not relax? Venna is in your hands now. Madame Vanderbilt happily smiled while holding her hand. Layla took the chance to say something. Of course, Willie is the lucky star of our family. When she becomes well known, you will be able to enjoy the rest of your life peacefully. Madame Vanderbilt was enjoying it all. Who wouldn't wish that their family would one day become successful so that they could enjoy life? The business wasn't doing well. So she had to rely on her grandson, but the latter was a disappointment. Hadn't she come to Bassburg because of Venna? She wasn't disappointed after coming to Bassburg. Even if it was because of her granddaughter instead of her grandson, it was worth it. It would be great if Lynn was half as capable as Willie. Madame Vanderbilt moved the topic to Linda, who was sitting on the couch. Linda had been staying in the city for a while now, but Willow never brought her out to socialize with the affluent families. She wasn't happy about it. But now that her grandmother was comparing her to Willow, she was even more upset. But no matter how bad she was, she couldn't do worse than her cousin, Maisie, right? That cousin of hers never showed up after the first time they met because she had been kicked out of the family. Linda wasn't as great as Willow, but she would be better than Maisie. Grandma, I knew you would bring me into this. I'm not as good as Willow, but I'm a lot better than Maisie, right? Linda's statement put Layla and Willow to shame. She didn't mean to insult them. But they felt it anyway. It would have been alright if she had just insulted Maisie, but it turned bad when she used her as a comparison. Only Layla and Willow knew that they had only gotten the money by pretending to be Maisie, but she just had to mention that Maisie wasn't as good as Linda. Didn't that hint that Willow was nothing compared to Linda without the bracelet and status? Madame Vanderbilt didn't say anything. She would rather have Linda, the useless granddaughter, over Maisie. At least, she was obedient. At that moment, Freddie called. And Willow went to the balcony to answer. Something that Freddie said made Willow happy. Are you serious? Maisie had said that she was going to auction off her designs at the Somerton auction 3 days later and even said that she would make the highest bid? Willow's eyes shone when Freddie confirmed the news. She gave Freddie $1,600,000 to design for her. If it wasn't because of Pearl and Maisie's collaboration to bring her down, she would have made it in the business already. But she was lucky. Even when she couldn't get into the jewelry business, she had the chance to become a noble. Maisie was going to become the highest paid during the auction? Haha, why would Willow let this opportunity slip away? It was time for her to fight back. She thought of something and said, Freddie, go find out what she's auctioning and find a way to get something that looks exactly the same. She was going to put an exact replica before Maisie's item went up for auction and call her out for plagiarism when she presented hers. Willow was excited to see how the international jewelry designer would survive in this business after that. Chapter 147. 3 days later, the Somerton auction started at 7 p.m. The buyers entered the auction hall with masquerade masks given out by the ushers. On top of high-value jewelry, the Somerton auction also auctioned antiques, and all the transactions were legal. The auction hall was shaped like a circle with traditional wooden structures. It was vintage and classy and made up of the grand hall and the VIP rooms on the first floor. There were 8 VIP rooms on the first floor with ceiling-high windows. The people and auction stage in the grand hall were fully visible from the rooms. To get into the VIP rooms, one had to have outstanding social status and a net worth of at least $150 million. Anyone who would be a patron of Somerton auction would need to have deep pockets. Maisie and Kennedy put on the masquerade masks and entered the hall. She was wearing a high-collared white dress with her hair up in a bun for a sleek look. Tassel earrings made of sequins went well with her collar, and the fitted waistline showed off her slender waist. She walked with Kennedy to their designated seats in the grand hall. Kennedy looked around at the people in the masks and asked, "Are you sure that Willow is going to show up tonight?" "She will." Freddie had leaked the news to Willow. And Maisie had even given Freddie the design for the item she was going to auction so that she could take Willow down once and for all. If Willow wanted someone to be a plagiarizer, it was going to be her. Unsurprisingly, Willow showed up. Even with a masquerade mask. They both instantly knew who each other was. Willow happily walked toward her. "You're really here." Freddie hadn't lied to her. "You're here for the fun?" Seeing that Maisie was still smiling, Willow crossed her arms and scoffed. "I'm here for the auction. But I'd also like to remind you that you still have time to withdraw from the auction if you don't want this to end too badly." Maisie scoffed and said, "We don't know who'll end up badly yet." She let her speak, but it was time that ended. "Maisie, don't be too proud just yet." Willow gnashed her teeth. Why would this woman still look so arrogant? Wait and see. Maisie was going to end up crying. A bodyguard in black walked toward her. "Ms. Willow, Mr. and Madam Lucas are waiting for you in the VIP room upstairs." Willow confidently tossed her hair when she heard that and smiled at Maisie. "I need to excuse myself, I'm going to the VIP room upstairs, enjoy your seats here." She hummed while she strutted away in her high heels after the bodyguard. Maisie frowned. Kennedy snapped around. "Mr. and Madam Lucas, how is that possible? The Lucas family is the one helping them." Why would the Lucas family know them? Maisie was curious too, but she would take everything back from Willow tonight, no matter who was supporting them. A hostess in a long gown walked over. "Dear guests, someone from the VIP room has invited you to join them." Maisie and Kennedy looked at each other. She asked, "Who is it?" The hostess gave a professional smile and patiently answered, "I'm sorry, the VIP told us not to disclose that information. You will find out if you come with me." Chapter 148. Maisie and Kennedy stood up and left with the hostess. Willow's face dropped when she saw them going to the first floor. She heard that the first floor of the auction hall was only for people with a great social standing. Was it Nolan? Willow bit her lip when she came to that realization. She was going to tear Maisie into shreds in front of Nolan that night. The hostess brought them to the storeroom and saw 4 bodyguards standing behind the door. Maisie was thinking if it was Nolan who was there. But the silhouette didn't match. Maisie was surprised when the man slowly turned around. The man wasn't wearing a mask. His warm smile narrowed his pretty eyes. "Looks like I have a good enough eyesight to recognize you." Maisie smiled. It was Helios Boucher. Maisie walked to the window and looked at the crowd below, curious. "Why are you here? Are you interested in jewelry auctions too?" This big shot rarely appeared in public except for that one time at the party. He wouldn't even be seen by people in the industry, let alone attend events like these. His sudden appearance at the Somerton auction was indeed a surprise. Helios smiled. "I just received a script about jewelry companies, and I wanted to learn a thing or two. I heard that you're a jewelry designer too. So I came to see if I could meet you and if I could take something back." "Thanks for the compliment, Mr. Boucher." Helios laid his arms on the railings in front of the window and looked at her. "There's no need for formalities, just call me by my name." Maisie smiled but didn't reply. Her eyes were on him. He was indeed the idol of the nation. He had a charm that was better appreciated from afar. Only he could rival Nolan Goldman when it came to looks or background in Bassburg. She had watched some of his movies. He was a natural actor with impeccable skills and could carry any character, be it the protagonist or the antagonist. He had had zero bad publicity after years of being in the industry, and the only pieces of news about him were all about the characters he portrayed. "Are you here to get some jewelry?" Helios looked toward her. Maisie shook her head. "The opposite, I'm here to auction off my designs." "So, you're a seller?" Helios was interested. "I'm looking forward to your designs." Maisie was stunned. She wouldn't call herself his friend. They had just shared a dance during the party. If his fans found out they would probably skin her alive. The auction began. The auctioneer on the stage rang the bell. The first item to be auctioned off was a pair of fan-shaped earrings made from pigeon blood rubies. The seller was Taylor Jewelry. The guests only needed to bid through their devices, and the prices would reflect the bids on the giant screen of the auction hall. Pigeon blood rubies were the prettiest of rubies. There weren't many that could be classified as pigeon blood rubies. And they were extremely expensive. The price on the screen rose quickly to $70 million and was still rising. It finally stopped at $97 million. The auctioneer rang the bell. Congratulations to the guest in the marble room for placing the winning bid. Chapter 149. Applause erupted. The next item to go on auction was still from Taylor Jewelry. After a few items, the highest price for jewelry from Taylor was $263 million, far more than any other item. The screen showed a peacock blue necklace next. When Kennedy saw it, he nervously looked toward Maisie. Helios, who seemed to have noticed his gaze, looked toward Maisie through the corner of his eyes too. "Seller, Willow Vanderbilt." The crowd booed and whispered among themselves. The sellers here were either well-known companies or famous jewelry designers. Willow was a name that many did not recognize. Only a few people had followed the drama on Twitter and learned about her fiasco with Miss Santiago. However, the item on the screen was pretty unique. The peacock blue necklace had a brilliant teardrop-shaped sapphire. The Malay blue diamonds on the tail of the peacock were a beautiful addition. This item was Peacock's pride that Maisie had designed. Too bad Willow just copied the design from Maisie's sketch, but didn't know that the main stone should be tanzanite, which would bring it to a new level. Willow was secretly delighted in the Blossom Room. Her heart was filled with excitement as she saw the price on the screen increase. Larissa turned and looked at her. "This is your design?" Willow smiled and nodded. Yes. She was lucky to have been able to put her design out before Maisie's. So what if Maisie designed it? It was hers anyway. Larissa didn't say a word but frowned while looking at the design on the screen. It was beautiful, but something was missing. The price finally stopped at $42 million, almost $50 million less than the Pigeon Blood Rubies, by Taylor. Willow was happy nonetheless. She didn't expect that item to fetch $42 million, but she thought to herself that Maisie's design was not that great after all. Maisie crossed her arms while her red lips curled. $42 million was too much. Helios smiled. You seem to know this item? She looked at Helios and smiled. It's my design. Helios was stunned, and suspicion showed through his eyes. Why is your design owned by someone else? Her own design was auctioned by someone else before her actual item, but she was still calm. She was indeed an impressive woman. But wait. After the next item was shown on the screen, there was confusion in the crowd, and the discussion was even louder. Isn't this the same item? What is happening? Are they auctioning two of the same item? That's just robbery. Larissa looked at Willow, reserved. What is this? Willow feigned ignorance. I have no idea. I think my design has been plagiarized. She thought that this would be the end of Maisie. However, when it was shown that the seller for this peacock's pride was Zora, everyone was astonished. The international jewelry designer Zora's design was the same as the new designer Willow Vanderbilt. The crew scurried to check if something had gone wrong with the computer, but the diagnostics showed that it wasn't an error. Chapter 150. That meant that there were two peacocks' pride. That was the first time a situation like this had occurred at Somerton. Would the international designer copy someone's work? They're a world-renowned designer. Why would they plagiarize? It was probably the new designer Willow who plagiarized. The discussion grew louder and louder. Larissa waved for one of the bodyguards to approach, whispered something to him, and he left. The bodyguard said something to the crew, and the crew made an announcement. I'm sorry. We are facing some technical issues. I'm afraid we need to put the auction on hold. We suspect that one of the items has been plagiarized, so we'll launch an investigation immediately. So, it really was plagiarism? It's so rare for plagiarized items to show up at an auction, someone said out loud. The two items were placed on stage, and an appraiser was asked to do an appraisal. If there really was plagiarizing, it would be a huge problem. Helios looked at Maisie, who was still smiling. You're not afraid? Maisie smiled. I'm in the right. The appraiser said something to the crew, and the crew confirmed they're all real jewels? The appraiser nodded. As to why this happened, it was most likely due to plagiarism. Sir. A clear voice came from the first floor. Everyone looked up at the woman in a white dress with a masquerade mask on, speaking calmly. You probably would be able to tell the difference between the two jewels used, right? Willow looked at Maisie, who was across her, gnashing her teeth. What game was this woman playing? The appraiser took a few good looks and suddenly found the difference. They're using different stones. The first one is just using a normal sapphire, but this one dash. The appraiser exclaimed, This is tanzanite. When Madame Nara, who was in the peach room, heard the word tanzanite, the hand that was holding a teacup froze. She remembered something and turned to the female bodyguard next to her. The bodyguard nodded and walked toward the window. Our madam would like to see both items on the large screen. The crew knew who was in the peach room, so they didn't dare to object. The two identical peacock blue items were projected on the giant screen. Everyone was in awe. The items looked exactly alike. But they could see that the second peacock's pride had a hint of purple in the blue gem when they looked closely. It was a rich and elegant color. The melee diamonds on the tail feathers were aquamarine gems that came in gradient shades of blue. The open tail didn't clash with the brilliance of the main stone, but instead perfectly brought out the soul of the item tanzanite blue. When the crowd learned that it was tanzanite, the price on the screen zoomed upward. Willow was flustered. What's going on? Didn't sapphire work just as well? She chewed on her nail. No, did Maisie frame me? She turned around, but Louis was staring straight at her, his eyes filled with confusion. She shuddered and tried to speak. To be honest, I wouldn't believe it if you said that Zora copied your design. He had no idea why, but he really couldn't feel any love for this cousin of his.